He agreed to one final blind date just to silence his mother's relentless meddling. 20 minutes late, critiquing his height and treating his armed guards like furniture, the woman who walked in didn't just disrespect his power, she laughed at it. For a man whose neck tattoos told stories of blood and whose empire was built on fear, that moment shattered everything he thought he knew. Welcome back to the story, family. You're about to see how a man who ends lives with a fountain pen meets his match. Make sure you follow and subscribe right now so you never miss a single twist in this journey. Drop your location in the comments. Where are you watching from today? Viper, Bo was not a man people provoked. As the cold-blooded leader of the Bo clan, his dragon-patterned suits and visible tattoos were warnings written in ink and silk. Blind dates were his mother's weapon of choice. 27 disasters orchestrated by a woman who refused to let her son's empire become his tomb. So when the 28th woman finally arrived, late, stunning, and outrageously unafraid, Dong-wook expected another terrified exit or another gold digger's performance. What he didn't expect was Lillian, a sharp-witted Atlanta vice principal who saw through his dangerous aura, demanded Korean barbecue like it was her birthright, and treated his reputation like an inconvenience. That night, in a luxury restaurant designed for intimidation, a mafia boss met the one woman who didn't want his money, fear his violence, or bow to his control, only call out his extra behavior and his unprocessed grief. And in doing so, she ignited a war he never saw coming. Dong-wook arrived at the restaurant 30 minutes early, as he always did. Control meant owning the space before your opponent even knew the game had started. The staff had already cleared the main dining room, leaving only his table beneath the chandelier's cold light. Jun stood by the entrance, arms crossed, while 2 more of his men positioned themselves near the kitchen exit. Overkill for a blind date, perhaps, but 27 failures had taught him that precaution wasn't paranoia. He loosened his collar, feeling the familiar brush of ink against his fingertips. The serpent's tail that coiled up from his chest, across his throat, ending just below his jawline, a map of violence his father had commissioned before he died. Most women noticed the tattoos immediately. Some pretended fascination, tracing the patterns with manicured nails while calculating the worth of his empire. Others saw the ink and invented urgent emergencies, their hands shaking as they fabricated dying grandmothers and sudden work crises. 27 women. 27 variations of the same performance. The first 3 had been terrified. One actually cried into her napkin when he asked about her hobbies. Numbers 4 through 9 played at bravery, laughing too loud at nothing, ordering expensive wine they barely touched. The rest divided cleanly into 2 categories. Those who wanted to fix him, armed with psychology degrees and intentions, and those who wanted to spend him, their eyes glazing over during conversation while they mentally redecorated his penthouse. His mother refused to accept defeat. After each disaster, she'd appear at his office with a new profile, a new promise, a new delusion that somehow the 28th iteration would be different. "You need someone who sees you, not the dragon," she'd said last week, sliding another photo across his desk. Someone who doesn't frighten easily. Dong-wook had stopped arguing. Easier to endure one more evening than listen to another lecture about legacy and loneliness and the difference between ruling an empire and actually living in one. He checked his watch. She was already 15 minutes late. Jun caught his eye from across the room, one eyebrow raised in a silent question. "Should we leave?" Dong-wook shook his head. His mother had extracted a promise. Finish this final date, give it a genuine chance, and she'd grant him 1 month without interference. 1 month of peace was worth any humiliation. The serpent on his neck seemed to tighten as he poured himself water, ice clinking against crystal. Somewhere in Atlanta, a woman named Lillian was either lost, disinterested, or calculating her entrance for maximum effect. He'd seen all 3 strategies before. What he hadn't seen, in 27 attempts, was someone who'd look at the dragon wrapped around his throat and smile like it was the least interesting thing about him. He was about to find out that the 28th time changed everything. She walked in at exactly 23 minutes past the hour, and Dong-wook's first thought was that his mother had finally lost her mind completely. The woman wore a gown that belonged at a film premiere, not a blind date. Deep emerald that caught the chandelier light and held it hostage. Her hair fell in perfect waves past her shoulders, and she moved through the restaurant like she owned considerably more than just the room. Jun stepped forward instinctively, hand moving toward his jacket, but she walked past him like he was a coat rack. "You must be the Viper," she said, stopping 3 feet from his table. Her voice carried the particular confidence of someone who'd spent years telling teenagers to sit down and shut up. "I'm Lillian. Sorry I'm late. Your city's traffic makes Atlanta look organized." No bow. No apology that sounded remotely sincere. No acknowledgement whatsoever of the 3 armed men watching her every move. Dong-wook stood slowly, letting the motion draw her attention to his full height. The serpent on his neck was fully visible above his collar, black scales catching the light. "Ms. Thompson, please sit." "Lillian's fine." She settled into her chair with the ease of someone who'd never been intimidated by anything more threatening than a school board meeting. "And before we do the whole mysterious crime boss routine, I need to know, does this place serve actual food, or is it just for atmosphere?" He blinked. In 27 previous dates, no one had questioned the venue. "The chef is Michelin-starred." "That's lovely. I want Korean barbecue." She pulled out her phone, completely ignoring June's sudden movement behind her. "Your mother said you knew all the good places. Something with beef. The kind where you cook it yourself and there's those little side dishes everywhere." "My mother." Dong-wook sat back down, reassessing everything. "You spoke with my mother." "Oh, did she not mention?" Lillian's smile could have cut glass. "She recruited me off some international dating app. Very thorough woman, your mom. Sent me a whole presentation about you. 15 pages. Honestly thought it was a scam at first, but the production value was too good." Across the room, he could see June's shoulders shaking with suppressed laughter. "She sent you a dossier. Complete with your favorite color, your business holdings. Well, the legal ones, and a fascinating section about your brooding but tender heart." Lillian leaned forward, elbows on the table in a way that would have horrified the previous 27 women. "Also mentioned you're about 5'9"? Because I wore heels and I'm still looking down at you." For the first time in 3 years, since his father's funeral, Dong-wook felt his mouth twitch toward something adjacent to a smile. "The tattoos don't bother you." "Baby, I was a vice principal at a Title I school in Atlanta." She waved her hand dismissively, the gesture somehow encompassing both his neck art and his armed guards. "I've broken up fights between kids twice your size. Now about that barbecue. Can you feel the tension building? If you're loving this drama, tap follow and like this video immediately to catch the next chapter. Don't be the only one to miss out. Join the story lovers worldwide right now." The Korean barbecue had been a mistake. Watching Lillian expertly flip meat while interrogating him about his childhood pets had thrown Dong-wook so completely off balance that he'd agreed to coffee. Now, standing outside a trendy cafe in Gangnam at 10 o'clock at night, he was determined to regain control of whatever this situation had become. June made the call. 30 seconds later, the cafe owner was ushering out the last customers, bowing repeatedly, promising the space would be completely private. Chairs scraped against tile. A college student abandoned her laptop mid-sentence. The barista looked terrified. Dong-wook held the door open for Lillian, watching for the moment realization would hit her. The moment she'd understand exactly who she was dealing with. She walked inside, looked around at the empty cafe, then turned to face him with her hands on her hips. "Are you serious right now? I prefer privacy for important conversations. You kicked out an entire coffee shop." She started laughing. Not nervous laughter, not the careful tittering of women trying to appease him, but genuine, full-throated amusement that echoed off the empty walls. "Oh my God, you actually kicked out a whole coffee shop because you wanted to have coffee. Do you hear yourself? This is the most extra thing I've ever seen, and I once watched a student hire a mariachi band to apologize for cheating on a test." June coughed behind his hand. Dong-wook shot him a look that promised consequences. "This is how I conduct business. Baby, this is a date, not a hostile takeover." Lillian walked to the counter, completely ignoring the intimidation Olympics happening around her, and smiled at the petrified barista. "Vanilla latte, please. Extra foam. And whatever the Viper wants, apparently he needs the whole building to order it." She settled into a corner booth and pulled out her phone. Dong-wook sat across from her, the serpent on his neck suddenly feeling tight, constricting. Every strategy he'd ever used, silence, intensity, the calculated deployment of violence as subtext, was failing spectacularly. "So here's the thing," Lillian said, scrolling through her phone. "Your mother's dossier was very comprehensive. Want to see?" Before he could answer, she turned the screen toward him. There, in a meticulously formatted PDF, was his entire life. Childhood photos, business acquisitions, that incident in Busan 3 years ago that was supposed to be buried, and a section titled, "Why My Son Needs Someone Strong." "She included your exact coffee order," Lillian continued, scrolling. "Said you clear out public spaces when you're nervous. Called it your control mechanism stemming from unprocessed grief regarding his father's death." She looked up, eyebrow raised. "Your mom might have been a therapist in another life." Dong-wook stared at the document, then at this impossible woman, then at June, who was now openly grinning. She violated approximately 15 confidentiality agreements. "She loves you." Lillian's voice softened slightly. "Also, she included your height as 5'9", but I'm thinking 5'8" tops." Lillian had demanded to see real Seoul, which was how Dong-wook found himself walking through Iwa Mural Village at midnight with no guards, no plan, and no idea how he'd lost control of his own evening. Again, the narrow streets climbed steep hills, lined with murals that bloomed across concrete walls. Flowers, faces, abstract patterns that locals had painted to save their neighborhood from demolition. Lillian stopped at each one, phone out, snapping photos like a tourist who'd forgotten she was walking beside one of Seoul's most wanted men. "Your mother's dossier didn't mention you had a thing for street art," she said, studying a mural of koi fish swimming upward. "I don't." Dong-wook shoved his hands in his pockets, feeling exposed without his suit jacket, without June's presence 3 steps behind. Just his white shirt and slacks, the dragon pattern absent, the serpent on his neck the only armor remaining. "I used to come here with my father. Before." He hadn't meant to say that. The words simply appeared, traitorous and raw. Lillian went still. Then she turned, really looking at him for the first time all night, not at the tattoos or the reputation or the carefully constructed walls, but at something underneath he'd forgotten was visible. "How long ago did you lose him?" 3 years. 2 months. 15 days. "And your mother started the blind dates when?" 3 years. 2 months. 16 days. The math hung between them, obvious and damning. Lillian's expression shifted into something he recognized from her stories about Atlanta. The look she gave students who were failing because they were hurt, not because they were lazy. "So she watched you bury your grief in violence and empire building, and decided the problem was you needed someone to come home to." Lillian sat down on a bench overlooking the city, patting the space beside her. That's some advanced Asian mom problem-solving right there. Dong-wook sat, keeping distance between them, watching Seoul sprawl below in a carpet of lights. "She thinks I'm becoming him. Cold. Unreachable. More dragon than man. Are you?" The question landed without judgment. Just curiosity. He'd spent 3 years ensuring nobody could ask him anything real, surrounding himself with people who feared him too much to see him. And here was this woman who'd known him for 6 hours, cutting straight to the truth. "I don't know who I am without the dragon anymore," he admitted quietly. "My father commissioned these tattoos when I was 17. Mapped out my entire life in ink. When he died, they were all I had left of his vision for me." Lillian reached over and did something no one had dared in 3 years. She touched the serpent's tail where it curved along his collar, her fingers gentle against the scales. "What if his vision and your life don't have to be the same thing?" Below them, Seoul glittered like scattered diamonds, and for the first time since his father's funeral, Dong-wook felt something crack open in his chest. "Stop scrolling. If you aren't following yet, you're missing the next viral twist. Like and subscribe right now or admit you've got a cold heart. Comment your city below. I'm watching for my true fans." The call came at 2 a.m, dragging Dong-wook from the first decent sleep he'd had in months. June's voice cut through the darkness, stripped of its usual humor. "We have a problem. The warehouse in Songo. Hong's people hit it an hour ago." Dong-wook was already reaching for his clothes, the dragon-patterned suit jacket he'd discarded just 3 hours earlier. Casualties. 2 of ours. They left a message. June paused, and in that silence, Dong-wook felt the world tilt sideways. They know about the American woman. The serpent on his neck constricted. What exactly did they say? Park Hong wants a meeting. Says he's interested in your new investment from Atlanta. Says she seems like someone who'd be missed back home. June's voice dropped lower. Boss, they have photos. Her arriving at the restaurant. The barbecue place. The village last night. Dong-wook's hand froze on his collar. They'd been followed. While he'd been confessing his father's ghost to a woman who somehow made him forget every survival instinct he'd honed, Park Hong scouts had been documenting every moment, cataloging every vulnerability. Where is she now? Hotel in Gangnam. I've got Min and Tae outside her door, but they're visible. Hong knows exactly where to find her. Of course he did. Park Hong had spent 2 years looking for leverage, any crack in the Viper's armor. And Dong-wook had handed it to him wrapped in an emerald gown with a smile that could cut glass. 27 previous women had been safe because they'd meant nothing. Lillian had been in Seoul for barely 24 hours, and she'd already become a target simply by making him laugh in an empty cafe, by touching his tattoos like they were art instead of warnings, by asking what if his father's vision wasn't his destiny. Triple the security on her hotel. Discreet positions. I don't want her knowing. Dong-wook grabbed his phone, scrolling to the number she'd made him save as the blind date who stayed. And get me everything on Hong's movements in the last week. He doesn't make plays without setup. Boss. June's voice carried a question he wasn't quite asking. The previous protocol for civilian exposure was immediate extraction and severed contact. Are we? She's not getting on a plane. The words came out harder than intended, edged with something that felt dangerously close to fear. Not until Hong is handled. And after. Dong-wook looked at his reflection in the window, the serpent coiling up his neck, his father's vision written in permanent ink, 3 years of carefully constructed isolation reflected back at him. Then he thought about Lillian's hand on his collar, asking what if. After, I'm calling my mother to thank her for the most dangerous matchmaking attempt in Seoul's history. June actually laughed. She's going to take credit for this entire mess, you know. She already has the wedding planned. I guarantee it. Dong-wook arrived at her hotel at 6 in the morning with a first-class ticket to Atlanta and what he believed was an airtight argument. He found Lillian in the lobby cafe, dressed in workout clothes, drinking coffee like she hadn't just been marked for death by Seoul's second most dangerous crime syndicate. Good morning, she said brightly. Want some breakfast? They have this amazing. You're leaving. He slid the ticket across the table. Printed boarding pass attached. Flight departs in 4 hours. June will escort you to the airport. Lillian looked at the ticket, then at him, then back at the ticket. No. This isn't a negotiation. You're absolutely right. It's not. She pushed the ticket back across the table with one finger. Because I'm not leaving Seoul because you suddenly decided to get all protective and mysterious. Dong-wook felt the serpent tighten around his throat. He'd prepared for tears, for anger, even for the calculating assessment of whether staying was worth the risk. He hadn't prepared for a flat refusal delivered with the same tone she'd used to demand Korean barbecue. The Hong faction knows about you. They're using you as leverage against me. So handle them. She sipped her coffee, maddeningly calm. You're supposed to be this terrifying crime boss, right? The Viper. Handle your business. I am handling it. By getting you somewhere safe. Safe or gone. Her eyes locked on his, and he saw the vice principal who'd broken up gang fights, who'd stared down teenagers twice her size without flinching. Because there's a difference, and we both know which one you're actually doing. He leaned forward, letting her see the full weight of 3 years of violence, of bodies he'd buried, of empire built on fear. People who get close to me end up dead, Lillian. That's not drama, that's statistics. People who run from bullies end up running forever. That's also statistics. She set down her coffee cup with a decisive click. I've spent 15 years teaching kids that you don't let threats dictate your choices. You think I'm going to fly back to Atlanta and spend the rest of my life wondering if some Korean mob boss learned to smile because of me, or if he went right back to being his father's ghost? This isn't about my father. Everything with you is about your father. Her voice softened slightly, losing its edge. And that's fine. That's grief. But don't insult me by pretending this is about my safety when it's really about yours. You're scared that I matter, so you're trying to make me leave before Hong proves it. The truth of it hit him like a knife between the ribs. Precise and devastating. If you stay, they will come for you. Then I guess you better teach me how to handle myself in your world. Lillian smiled, sharp and certain. Or we handle them together. Your choice, Viper. Can you feel the tension building? If you're loving this drama, tap follow and like this video immediately to catch the next chapter. Don't be the only one to miss out. Join the story lovers worldwide right now. The Songo warehouse smelled like rust and old blood, which was appropriate for the kind of conversation Dong-wook was about to have. He'd left Lillian at his penthouse with June and 4 armed guards, all of whom had explicit instructions to restrain her if necessary. She'd agreed to stay only after he'd promised to come back and tell her everything. He was planning to break that promise. Some things were too dark to share with someone who still believed in fighting fair. Park Hong waited in the center of the warehouse, surrounded by 8 of his men, backlit by dusty light filtering through broken windows. He was older than Dong-wook by a decade, with scars that told stories of Seoul's uglier years and eyes that held no illusions about honor among thieves. Viper, Park said, smiling like they were old friends. Thank you for accepting my invitation. You hit my warehouse and stalked my guest. This isn't an invitation. It's a declaration. Dong-wook stopped 10 feet away, hands loose at his sides, the serpent on his neck visible above his collar. So declare. Always so direct. Your father had more poetry in him. Park circled slowly, boots scraping against concrete. Beautiful woman, the American. Lillian Thompson, vice principal, arrived Seoul 3 days ago. Staying at your penthouse now, I understand. Very domestic. Get to the point. The point is leverage, Viper. The point is that you've spent 3 years building walls, and now there's a crack. Park stopped circling, his smile sharpening into something cruel. Your territory in Itaewon. Sign it over to me, and Ms. Thompson flies home intact. Keep it and she goes home in pieces. Small ones. Over several weeks. The threat hung in the air, casual and absolute. Around them, Park's men shifted slightly, hands moving toward weapons. Dong-wook calculated odds, angles, exit strategies. 8 against 1. He'd survived worse, but not without collateral damage that would paint this warehouse red. You're assuming she means enough for me to surrender territory. Oh, please. Park laughed, the sound echoing off metal walls. You cleared a cafe for her. Took her to your father's favorite spot in the village. I have photos of you looking at her like she's oxygen and you've been drowning. Don't insult both of us by pretending she's disposable. Dong-wook felt the serpent constrict, felt his father's ghost whispering that this was what happened when you let anyone close, when you forgot that the dragon stands alone or burns everyone around it. How long do I have? 48 hours. After that, I start sending you pieces of that beautiful smile. Park's eyes glittered with victory. Your father would have already made the trade. He understood that empires matter more than. The warehouse door slammed open, and Lillian walked in wearing yesterday's emerald gown and holding her phone like a weapon. Hi, sorry, are we threatening to dismember people? Because I recorded that last part. Dong-wook's blood turned to ice. Behind him, he heard the distinct sound of safeties clicking off, 8 guns now pointed at the most reckless woman in Seoul's history. Lillian, get out. Absolutely not. She walked further into the warehouse, heels clicking on concrete, phone held up like a shield. And before anyone gets trigger happy, this is streaming. Live. To 3 different cloud services and my best friend Monica in Atlanta, who has very explicit instructions about what to do if this feed cuts out. Park Hong's smile faltered. You're bluffing. Am I? Lillian turned the phone toward him, showing the screen. Because I've got you on video threatening to send pieces of my beautiful smile to Dong-wook, which is honestly the creepiest thing I've heard since Jerome Patterson tried to explain his art project involving dead squirrels. And before you think killing me solves this, Monica's a paralegal with the ACLU and an unhealthy addiction to true crime podcasts. She will make you famous. No one will care about some American. Baby, I will make you a meme. Lillian's voice cut through the warehouse like a blade. Do you know what happens to crime bosses who go viral in 2025? The police can't ignore you anymore. You become a liability. Every politician who's taken your money suddenly needs to distance themselves. Every cop you've bribed has to prove they're clean by investigating you extra hard. She walked closer, and Dong-wook watched in horror and awe as Park Hong actually stepped back. I've spent 15 years teaching teenagers how to weaponize social media against bullies. You think I can't turn Seoul's criminal underworld into a Netflix documentary with better lighting? I've got your face, your voice, your explicit threat against an American citizen, and about 47 ways to make this the Korean authorities' problem before breakfast. You don't understand how things work here. Oh, I understand perfectly. You operate in shadows because sunlight kills your business model. Lillian held up her phone, the red recording light glowing like a promise. So here's my counteroffer. You leave Dong-wook's territory alone, you forget I exist, and I delete this footage. Or I turn you into the most documented crime boss in Seoul's history, complete with hashtags and a TikTok account. Park Hong looked at his men, then at the phone, then at Dong-wook with something approaching respect mixed with disbelief. You brought a vice principal to a gang war. I didn't bring her. She followed me. Against explicit instructions. And recorded everything, Lillian added cheerfully. So what's it going to be? Peace, or do I introduce you to my 30,000 Instagram followers who love a good villain takedown? The warehouse went silent except for the sound of Park Hong's pride dying slowly in the rust-filled air. 48 hours, he finally said. For both of you to leave Seoul. Counterpoint, no. Lillian smiled. Merry Christmas, by the way. Subscribe real quick, tell me where you're watching from and get ready, because the next 5 seconds will shock you. Park Hong left the warehouse with 8 armed men and 0 dignity, which Lillian declared was the most satisfying exit she'd witnessed since Marcus Chen got expelled for hacking the district's grading system. Dong-wook had spent the entire car ride back alternating between fury that she'd risked her life and awe that she'd won a gang war with nothing but a smartphone and audacity. You're insane, he said for the 7th time as they entered his penthouse. You already mentioned that. She kicked off her heels, wincing. These were not designed for warehouse standoffs. Also, your guy Jun owes me 50,000 won. He bet I wouldn't make it past the door. He should have physically restrained you. He tried. I told him I'd include him in my documentary as henchman number 3, the one who failed. Lillian collapsed onto his couch, somehow still elegant despite having just live-streamed a criminal negotiation. He let me go after that. Dong-wook's phone buzzed. A message from his mother. Asterisk, I'm assuming the American woman survived, since Park Hong just called to complain about her. Dinner tomorrow. Both of you. I'm making bulgogi. Asterisk. He showed Lillian the message. She laughed until tears ran down her face. Your mom has Park Hong's number? My mother has everyone's number. It's terrifying. Christmas Eve found them at a private restaurant, not the one from their first date, but a smaller place his mother had chosen, decorated with subtle lights and pine branches. She arrived exactly on time, wearing a designer hanbok and the expression of a general who'd won an impossible campaign. Lillian, she said warmly, embracing her like a daughter she'd always had. I heard you threatened Park Hong with TikTok. Instagram, actually. TikTok was plan B. Excellent choice. Instagram has better international reach. His mother turned to Dong-wook, her smile sharp with victory. 28 blind dates. I told you the right woman would find you. You sent her a 15-page dossier and weaponized an international dating app. I prefer strategic matchmaking. She settled into her chair, already pulling out her phone. Now about the wedding. Spring or fall? I'm thinking spring. Cherry blossoms. Very romantic. Lillian nearly choked on her water. We've known each other for 5 days. 5 days, one gang war, and complete emotional honesty about his dead father trauma. His mother waved dismissively. Some couples take years to get there. You speed ran it. Dong-wook felt the serpent on his neck, his father's vision permanently inked into his skin, and looked at Lillian. This impossible woman who'd turned his world sideways with coffee orders and recorded threats and questions about whether his father's legacy had to be his destiny. Before I show you the craziest part, hit that subscribe button and tell me where you're watching from, which part got you gasping. This is about to get wild. She hasn't agreed to a second date yet, he pointed out. Lillian met his eyes, her smile dangerous and warm. Who says this was a date? This was a business negotiation. So negotiate, he said quietly. Outside, Seoul glittered with Christmas lights, and somewhere in the city, Park Hong was learning what happened when you underestimated a vice principal with good Wi-Fi. Inside, his mother was already texting wedding venues, and Lillian was leaning closer, her hand finding the serpent's tail on his collar. I want another blind date, she said. Number 29. Except this time you pick the place. Somewhere that means something to you, not your father. Dong-wook felt something crack open in his chest, the same feeling from the mural village but deeper, more permanent. And if I don't know anywhere like that? Then we find it together. Her fingers traced the ink on his neck, gentle and certain. Consider it research for your mom's documentary. How a crime boss learned to stop worrying and love the blind date. His mother looked up from her phone, eyes gleaming. I'm copywriting that title. But Dong-wook was watching Lillian, seeing the challenge in her smile, the promise of something his father's vision had never included. A future he got to choose, written in something more permanent than ink. 29 it is, he said. What he didn't say, June had just sent him a message. Park Hong's retreat wasn't surrender. It was strategy. 3 of Hong's allies had gone silent in the past hour. Radio dead. Which meant either they were planning something bigger, or someone else was making moves while everyone watched the American woman's viral moment. The serpent on his neck tightened as Lillian laughed at something his mother said, completely unaware that winning one battle had just painted a target on all 3 of them. But that was a problem for tomorrow. Tonight, for the first time in 3 years, Dong-wook let himself believe his 28th blind date might actually become something worth protecting. Even if it killed him. Thank you for staying until the very end to see Min Jae finally start living. If you believe that even the most broken tattooed souls deserve a second chance at love, hit that subscribe button right now. Don't let this be the end. Comment everyone deserves love to show your support, or are you siding with the villains? Subscribe to keep the heart of this channel beating.